Have you ever reduced yourself or another person to a single role? Let's use mother, for example. What is a mother supposed to be, according to you? How is she supposed to act? And what happens when she no longer fits that role? More importantly, what happens inside your own psyche when someone breaks the image you've built of them? This week's episode is a discussion on a concept developed by Carl Jung on the evolution of the feminine archetypes within the psyche. While I'm no Jungian psychologist, learning about this has snapped me out of some pretty consistent, gnarly cycles and how I relate to myself and others. This model explores both our unconscious patterns and the process of becoming conscious within them. It offers a lens through which we can understand concepts like the shadow self, the divine feminine, projection, and identity. Interestingly, this topic was originally developed specifically for the male psyche, but to be honest, seeing it as something only for women or only for men sounds like a load of bull. By the way, I'm working on not cursing, so God help me. I definitely cursed in this episode. Anyway, so it's helped me understand myself and others so much better, and it's validated some major shifts I've moved through recently that have at times ruffled the feathers of people who thought they knew me best. While this framework has been incredibly helpful for me, it's really important not to elevate any model into ultimate truth or use it as a way to become a quote-unquote better person. That's the trap so many systems of psychological development have, and falling into that trap would have you entirely missing the point of all of this. So I encourage you to listen with an open heart, observe your mind throughout the process, and remember that everything you need has been right here all along. Some highlights from this episode. Why the rise of the feminine may be less to do with the matriarchy or New Age spirituality and more to do with something shifting within the human psyche. Signs of a man or a woman expressing each archetypal phase, both unconsciously and in an integrated way. Personal stories on how I've recognized my own experience within each phase. The myths, the legends, and historical figures associated with these archetypes, Eve, Helen, Mary, and Sophia, and signs that you may be moving into what Jungian psychology calls the Sophia phase. If you'd like to hear the complete discussion of this episode topic, you can find the last 18 minutes of this episode on Patreon. If you're new to this whole thing with Patreon with me, to respect my time and energy, I have created a space for where I go bleed over the allotted hour I give myself for the podcast. This is usually where I really tie in a lot of these major concepts for myself, perhaps for you, and where I just get a little bit deeper. So you can find that information for the Patreon in the show notes. If you would like to work with me, you can find out what that even means. All my information in the show notes as well. Welcome to the School of Whispers podcast. This is your host, Stephanie. I'm a licensed acupuncture physician and herbalist with a background in psychology, health sciences, and exercise physiology. Within my own spiritual awakening, I found myself learning pivotal lessons when I got myself to be in silence. Within that silence, the whispers came through. This is my sacred space of vulnerable storytelling where my guests and I share about the magic that comes from a life of following these whispers. I'm grateful you made it here, and I hope this show inspires you to live a life of following your own whispers. Let's get into the show. Hello, my friend. I hope you are doing well. This topic. So before I really dive into it, I feel like a caveat is warranted here. So this is a concept from Carl Jung, and I am by no means an expert on any Jungian philosophy, psychology. I'm not a practitioner of it. So before any of you Jungians come after me, I'm not claiming to know this concept through and through, especially from a Jungian perspective. I'm sharing it because it's something that really opened me up to an awareness within. And so while I'll be borrowing these concepts from Carl Jung, and I'm so grateful that this information is out here, I'm going to be kind of adapting it towards my experience and using storytelling to paint a full picture, with the intention that this may serve you in some way, open up some awarenesses. But speaking of you, my next caveat here is that this isn't a podcast about how or who you should or shouldn't be. I encourage you to listen to this with an open heart. Listen with your heart rather than your mind, because if you really listen to all these ideas, there could be this process that happens when you're so used to listening with your mind that you'll be like, oh shit, I'm doing all these things. I'm bad. And I need to strive to be like this. No, there's absolutely nothing wrong with whatever phase that you're in. And I think that if one strives to be this Sophia archetype, then you're going to lose the plot and kind of lose the whole purpose of this information, this knowledge that's meant to be alchemized into your own wisdom. And so that's what I'm doing here. I've been studying this for almost 6 months now, and it's sort of seasoned this phase in my life with a level of awareness and understanding. And I have been through that phase of like, oh, this is what Sophia is. I'm going to be just like Sophia. Like, no, I'm not here to become like a concept that a person, especially an intellectual, a man, no shade to any men, but I feel like in the zeitgeist of knowledge, there's this history of men being rulers, authorities rather, in the field of knowledge, and this sort of elevation and reverence of what they've been able to put together, where at the end of the day, putting this, as you'll soon learn, putting anything, anyone, any knowledge on a pedestal, any concept of who you think you are and how you should be is just going to drive you further and further away from your own heart's true knowing and wisdom. Okay, so in the spirit of opening the heart, following the heart, quieting the mind, using the mind, let's talk about why anyone would even want to understand these concepts. So for Jung, the concept of the anima, which is all of these aspects of the psyche that I'll be discussing here, it's the inner feminine image in a man's consciousness. He described 4 broad developmental stages of the anima, symbolically represented by feminine figures: Eve, the biological woman; Helen, the muse; and Mary or Maria, the Holy One; and Sophia, which is embodied wisdom. And we're going to spend a lot of time talking about Sophia here, but the question is, why does any of this matter? Well, first off, the idea that these concepts are only applicable to men is just so far off the mark. And it's an experience that all beings face, especially in this time of the rise of the feminine. And the rise of the feminine isn't about the rise of matriarchy or some new age trend or shift. It's humanity becoming once again conscious of the wholeness of our nature. I would even hesitate to use the idea of like this is the internal feminine aspect of the being. Like, yes, we're going to be talking about the stories of women across time and history, and I'm going to talk about my experience as a woman within these archetypes, but I feel like it further dilutes the idea that this is something that's relevant, again, to all men, women, whatever you identify yourself within the aspects of the psyche. And so the rise of the feminine, it's not guided by the yang aspects of rebellion. Although to others it may seem like you're doing that in terms of reaching this phase of Sophia, which again, we'll get into soon and you'll understand what I mean. But it's about being able to hold the awareness of what's right here, what's been here all along. I had this realization yesterday. I was laughing, and it might make sense, but it might not make sense. But I realized that ideas, a good idea, a brilliant idea, is just our mind being able to create a story out of an awareness that's already there. And while that story is valuable because it helps us sort of digest information that our mind can use the mind that we can use within our mind to change how we are and to be aware of how we are. The most important thing is to know that this has already been here. All you need to do, you don't even have to change. You just need to remember. So walking a lifetime of integrating all these aspects of the feminine archetypes and the feminine aspect of existence is about listening to the quiet call to slow down when everything around you is screaming to accelerate. So it's about the impulse to surrender rather than conquer. And as I've recently learned, surrender is not about submitting. It's not about giving up or giving in. It's not about being conquered. It's about the conquering of the mind and the ego's impulse to compare, to outsource worth, and to act from fear. Surrender is laying down your weapons, which we could look at them as coping mechanisms, and letting go of desire to make it all happen, to manifest, and instead to flow with spirit. So it's not about being passive. Being in your feminine is not about being passive. It's about acceptance. So Sophia, the sort of quote unquote ultimate goal within this stream of knowledge is about feeling rather than proving. It's feeling over repression and remembering over obsession. It's not about worshiping external concepts and figures, but awakening to the infinite consciousness within. So it's not the disappearance, the end of logic. It's about the transformation that happens when you are choosing to be guided by your heart rather than your mind. Follow the heart, use the mind. It's a balance of power with grace, and understanding that power is not yours, but it flows through you. So let's get into these archetypes. So Eve, as I mentioned before, it's a biological woman. It's about sex, physical attraction, and motherhood. And as I've studied this idea of the animus, the anima rather, I've realized that the more that one develops within each stage, from Eve to Helen, Mary, Sophia, less and less people tend to develop their minds further from this stage. So a lot of people sort of stay within the Eve aspect. And when we're discussing Jung, there's always going to be this aspect of the shadow self. So what is the shadow? The shadow is blind spots of the psyche. And I want to give you the warning of ostracizing your shadow. People tend to do that when they have an awareness. They're like, oh shit, I've been like this. I don't want to be like this. I can't believe I've been like this. And if you ostracize that part of your shadow, you're just going to stay further in the dark. So instead of seeing the shadow as something that's your like bad side, your dark side, treat it as a level of unconsciousness making its way to the conscious, and our key to accessing our Shakti, which is the power of the unmanifest. So I think we all know the story of Eve within the book of Genesis in the Bible. The first woman, she's created from the rib of man. She is the biological woman, the mother of life and earthbound femininity and instinct, fertility, sexuality. And I sort of think of the root and the sacral. You could see this whole journey as the journey through the chakra systems. This is the aspect of the feminine that's the life giver, as well as the sensual being. So not as much sensual as in sexual, but the being that is in the experience of the senses. So according to Jung, in a man's psyche, this stage often manifests as attraction to women, primarily through physicality and instinct, dependence on women for comfort, grounding, and emotional holding, conflation of woman with mother. This is something I think that, especially with intellectual men, can be really, really unconscious. How do you know a man is looking at his partner as the mother in his life? Well, if you're operating from a fear of abandonment or her leaving your life, you consider it, you see as like the loss of nourishment, the loss of the aspect of being cared for, then yeah, you are unconsciously conflating and projecting your partner, the woman in your life, as this Eve archetype. This aspect of Eve, it's pre-reflective, pre-idealized, and pre-spiritual. In women, the Eve archetype can be expressed as identification with body and fertility, over identification with body and fertility. I think of people in the wellness space. As an acupuncturist, I mentored with a woman who was a doula acupuncturist, and so I worked a lot within the fertility field, and I see these women, they sort of put all their worth into their ability to conceive life as in a child. It could also be expressed as strong instinctual intelligence, life-giving presence, and a deep connection to the cycles and earth. So as you're hopefully understanding here, being within this phase is not about being underdeveloped or stuck in your senses. There's this beauty to it that is necessary to embody and to integrate within your entire life. And I would argue that instead of somebody jumping from one phase, Eve, Helen, Maria, Sophia, especially Eve, Helen, and Maria, it's actually more of this subtle movement. When I looked back at my life with this awareness of these ideas, I'm like, oh, that's where I operated from Eve. That's where I operated from so-and-so. If you listen to my last podcast, the one of dharmic dating, then you would understand at what points I was operating from my Eve archetype. So shadow expressions for men or women, but specifically for women, might include over-identification as the caretaker. I have a loved one who often says that a mother is only as happy as her unhappiest child. So basically what that means is if one of her children is suffering, then she suffers. There's also this loss of a sense of self within motherhood or relationships, and then using sexuality unconsciously for security or validation. That's if you listen back to the dharmic dating, I was 100% like there's that operation within this sort of aspect of the psyche. So according to Jung, when a man is primarily relating to the Eve level of the anima, his relationships may revolve around need, desire, possession, or survival bonding or trauma bonding. Women may be unconsciously equated with security or with temptation, and sexuality may be entangled with shame or fear. Seeing the woman as the temptress or the one to blame for man's fall from his morality, right? Like it's not his fault that he cheated. It's not his fault that he looked at the woman or touched her or, assaulted her. It's because of the energy that she was putting off. And I'm laughing at the irony that this is still happening. This is still happening across time and history. And, men, especially in power, but men in general, and, women too, but it's this belief that you have no agency over your own senses and experience within your sexuality. This split is just as old as time. So how you may know that you are acting unconsciously from this space of the Eve archetype could be the idea of the devouring mother, that mother who's just wants to keep her babies close. Oh my gosh, I heard recently about a story of people who purposely told their very educated, privileged children, the family comes from means, and they had no qualms in sharing that they have raised their children to be afraid of travel and afraid of going out into the world, because their family unit really is very harmonious and they all get along really well and they want to keep their children close. Another shadow aspect would be emotional dependency. You could use the term codependence. Fear of feminine power. And I think that also comes in with this projection of temptress energy. I have a friend who she and her, we're actually not really in each other's lives anymore, so I have a lot of love for her, but like she and her husband are super, super, super Christian. And I follow this woman on Instagram who is a tantric teacher, and she had this whole post about the sacred slut or the temptress energy and sort of integrating it. And she was in a church, and he just commented, I saw that he commented on this whole thing about how she is working from the devil, from Beelzebub, and, just all sorts of bad and wrong within that energy. And for me, I understand now that this is his psyche wrestling with at the risk of putting words to his internal process, there's this instinctual attraction. I mean, there's a reason why the woman was in lingerie and red lipstick and moving her body sexually. There's a reason why he felt attracted to open that post and to look at it and to read about it and to make a comment. There's a very natural physiological process that happens when someone sees certain images, and there's maybe this conscious or unconscious pull towards it. And then within the other aspect of the psyche is just this embodiment of understanding that feeling of whatever you could put the word to, of retraction, disgust, get that away from me. That's of the devil. That's a projection of that internal experience that is happening inside. So according to Jung, when a man is able to move through to the next stage, it's because he's able to embody and shift his projection of women. So rather than looking outside of himself to blame for the physiological reaction to happen, I think of rape culture. It's not his fault. She was asking for it. She was wearing a certain thing. That's all really underneath that umbrella in a lot of ways. And then, of course, the other side of that duality, that mother, the caretaker, the man is looking for care and support and a sense of safety. He's providing that for himself. But again, like, women can do that too. I've myself, within my late adolescence and early to mid 20s, was looking for someone to replace my mom. My mom was my mom and my dad. She took care of me so well. And to this day, she still saves my ass. She's my hero in so many ways. And so I was looking for that in a spouse because I didn't have confidence in myself in terms of taking care of myself, like paying the bills, cleaning a home, keeping a nice home, or even just being able to afford a nice home. I just had a lot of doubt in my ability, and I've learned through this process how to really, really care for myself. And in that, I feel such a sense of gratitude and wholeness and safety within that process. Okay, so if Eve is earth and blood, that ancient yin, then Helen is image and fire. Eve is the instinctual woman, and Helen is the woman of beauty, inspiration, and enchantment. So it's this evolution of a woman being so much more than her role as the caretaker. So if you're not familiar with the story of Helen of Troy, she was a daughter of Zeus. Her mom was like a swan or something. And she was the wife of the king of Sparta, King Menelaus. And this whole aspect of her being placed on this pedestal, it's what triggered the whole story that is one of the most ancient celebrated stories of all time, Homer's Iliad. So to give you the cliff notes, Paris of Troy, he's the son of one of the kings of Troy. He comes and visits Sparta, and he's like, oh my God, Helen, just as every man is. And the legend is it's kind of fuzzy. I wasn't there, but I would assume the two of them fell in love and they ran away to Troy together. But also the legend is that he stole her away, and Menelaus is like, are you fucking kidding me? You're really going to come to my home and then steal my wife? And then comes the decade-long Trojan War. So Helen is the muse. She is the beloved. She is erotic allure and the aesthetic refinement and romantic projection. When I look at my Instagram feed, my feed is curated to display the Helen archetype for sure. And this is an archetype that I've sort of been jumping through. I feel like I went from Eve to Helen, to Helen within my youth, and then Maria, and then back to Helen. And then, the story continues. So at the Helen stage, according to Jung, a man's anima is no longer purely biological. It becomes idealized, romanticized, projected onto a specific woman, and associated with art, poetry, and longing. Everybody is all about yearning these days. We'll just leave that there. So this is where the greatest love stories of all time begin, but it's also where illusion begins. So the Helen anima says, this woman is extraordinary. She is my destiny. She completes me. It is Eros filtered through fantasy. And so the really key aspect here to understand is Helen is almost always projected. The man doesn't see the woman as a whole person. He sees this radiant image that his psyche casts upon her. For a woman, this archetype can manifest as identification with being desired, worth being tied to desire, cultivation of aesthetic power, muse energy, romantic intensity, and deep longing to be seen as extraordinary. For myself, oh my God, being a twin, being just raised in the zeitgeist of the 2000s culture. It's all about guys and love stories being like, you're not like other girls, or how to stand out from other women. And I remember reading this magazine. It was in one of those fucking 17 magazine or something. And it was girl hot versus guy hot. And I was like, oh, I want to be considered, how it was is, do you want to be the woman that girls think you're beautiful, admire you, or do you want to be the woman that men desire? And I was just that one, because for me, that's where I saw power. And so psychologically, this stage can look like falling hard and fast, feeling or encouraging obsession. And the romance has this drama to it, the star-crossed lovers. And there's obviously within that this idealization that is followed by disillusionment. And as I'm listing these, I realize these qualities don't necessarily need to be projected on a woman or a romantic partner. They could also be projected onto new ideas, new careers, new hobbies as well. And when things don't work out, because they don't, any relationship or hobby or career that's built off of aesthetic and it's jumping in without any sort of foundation, they don't work out. And the age-old quote of you've changed. You're not the woman I thought you were. When in reality, what's happening is your projection of that woman or that idea of the woman or idea of who you think you are has dissolved. So Helen brings ecstasy. There's this beautiful aspect of eros and sensuality more than the senses, right? To work with the idea of romance and love and inspiration, but it also brings collapse. Because as I mentioned before, there's this idealization, there's this lack of foundation, and in my opinion, a lack of true intimacy. So shadow sides can include seduction games, narcissistic mirroring, addiction to romance, emotional drama, and valuing image over substance. Not many people are going to like hearing this from me, but a really typical symptom that I see of people valuing image over substance is engaging in cosmetic procedures without truly considering or just caring about what this could actually do to your body. It's this elevation of aesthetic with a lack of deep self-inquiry. And I'll just leave that there. So for women specifically, some key indicators that might reveal to you that you're unintegrated within the shadow aspect of your Helen is losing yourself in being the beloved, manipulating desire unconsciously, self-worth tied to admiration, and performing femininity rather than inhabiting it. So story time here. Let's see if I can make this quick. In my past marriage, I definitely was in just ping-ponging from Eve, Helen, Maria with him and how he projected me. And I very much unconsciously based who I was off of how others perceived me. So I leave that relationship and, I'm kind of stumbling through the dating world, finding my feet. And recently I got really hung up on this guy. And he's wonderful in a lot of ways and also not for me. It was my gut right when I met him. I was like, oh no, he's not for me. But he's funny, he's intelligent, he's very much in the same sort of world that I'm in terms of spirituality and working with sacred plant teachers. And I felt really special in his eyes. Like he really elevated me on this pedestal similar to my ex. And I saw myself all of a sudden sort of beginning to perform. It was a very subtle thing. It was like my mind was like wanting to really be that version of a woman that he saw me to be. And, or at least I think, here's the key here, that I think I saw him to see me as. And so despite my heart being like, no, he's great and he's not for you, I sort of fell into this cycle with him of us like really falling hard and fast and sort of thinking like, oh, this must be destiny, this must be fated, like all these stories. And when we finally decided, okay, let's see if this is actually real, and our friendship turned romantic, I was in absolute turmoil and doubt. I went from feeling really steady and sure to like every morning being like, what the fuck am I doing? What? I don't know about this. And then really it was my heart being like, stop it. And my mind being like, but let me tell you all the reasons why it's a yes, when it was still a no. And so I went to my friend and I told him what was going on. And he goes, well, let me ask you a question. Why him? When you first met him, you told me it was a no. So why him? And I said, because I feel really loved and appreciated by him. And he goes, would you say that's really important to you in a relationship, to feel loved and appreciated? Absolutely, I answered. And then he goes, well, let me ask you this. Do you love and appreciate yourself? And I hesitated and I said, mostly. And he goes, mostly? Steph, it's either a yes or a no. Do you love and appreciate yourself? And I realized I didn't, because love and appreciation is something that when it's there, it's always there all along. And so what I realized, that it wasn't so much that I wasn't loving and appreciating myself, like everything from drinking water to taking a breath to taking a shit, giving the body exactly what it needs is being in a state of love for yourself. Self-love is giving your body what it needs, and giving the spirit and appreciating what the spirit needs here in this lifetime. So it was there all along, but I didn't believe that I fully loved and appreciated myself. And so I was outsourcing it. It was actually during that time that I came across this concept. And yeah, it sort of snapped me out of this sort of illusion of the Helen phase. So let's kind of step into the shift from Eve to Helen. Eve is, I need you, please stay, don't leave me, feed me, protect me, whereas Helen is, want me, see me, choose me, fight for me. But when you integrate these aspects of the shadow, it's see me, as in, here I am. See me in the mirror, not you guy over there, see me as worthy. It's looking in the mirror or closing your eyes even and feeling that full aspect of yourself. It's choosing yourself, and it's fighting for yourself, not against other people, but from the stories that your mind is telling you that you aren't worthy and you're not enough, that you need to turn your face to this degree just so you can look a certain way in a photo, and to write the perfect caption under that photo, and to maybe use a photo editor, or, sucking your tummy. I see the Helen aspect as the aspect of the solar plexus and the heart, because when a woman starts to understand her role with men, she starts to understand power. And why would you use your power for men when you can use it for so many other things, or your relationship with power? And that power is in your solar plexus. But I also think about the whole idea of like having a flat stomach or big breasts, or being, thin, or, having a certain type of body type in order to feel that worth. I don't know about you, but I can't tell you how many times, literally cannot tell you. It is the number is infinite amounts of times that I've looked at myself in the mirror, looked at myself from the side, and looked at my stomach and felt unworthy, and gave my power away to how I thought I should look. But let's continue with the sort of the light aspect of it. So Eve is rooted in the body, and Helen is lit up by imagination. So as again with the chakras, and I can relate it to the spirits of Chinese medicine, there's an ascent happening here. All right, let's tap into the Maria stage. So this is a stage where the feminine becomes spiritually elevated, morally purified, untouched by instinct, associated with compassion and grace, and moves beyond sexuality. This is the transcendent feminine. So at this stage, the anima is no longer purely erotic. The woman to the man, and according to Jung, becomes a spiritual guide, a moral compass, a holy presence, or a compassionate mother of the soul. So in this stage, a man may revere women, idealize purity, split sexuality and spirituality, and place women on pedestals. So this is where love becomes devotion rather than desire, and it can also become extremely disembodied. I see a lot of aspects of the Helen idea within this phase. It's this pedestal and this sort of separation of you to me. Like, you are this otherworldly being, this goddess. I'm not worthy. You're everything a perfect woman embodies. I just can't believe that you're even just giving me this attention right now. And some women love that. If that's your prerogative, awesome. Personally, after just my research, everything I've been through, I want to be with a man who feels worthy of being with me, who sees me and sees my fullness and is just like, damn right, I absolutely deserve. I have worked lifetimes to be with a woman like this. For women, Mary energy can manifest as devotional orientation, selfless caregiving, spiritualized identity, and moral clarity. The shadow of Mary includes that whole Madonna whore split, the repression of sexuality, moral superiority, holier than thou sort of idea. I think of like the holy phoniness, passive suffering, and self-sacrifice that erases the self. So it's this whole idea of like, I must be pure to be loved. I must endure. I must transcend my body. Or in men, again, like that idea of like, she's too good for me. So more about shadow expression, some indicators that you may be unconsciously moving through this phase is martyrdom and really getting off on it. Getting off on the suffering that you do for others and thinking that you're better off for it. Suppressed anger, big one. And let's jump back to a man's experience here. There's a lot of men out there who have a really hard time holding their own, holding steady within a woman's anger or rage, and they sort of break down or blame or shame. I remember when my ex would relapse, and I'm not really an angry, explosive person. For the most part, every time I was really calm, cool, and collected, but there was this one time where I popped off. I felt absolute rage and expressed it. And it shook him. It scared him. And his reaction was to shame me for it. And I ended up apologizing. And in the moment, I felt that shame and kind of curled in on myself. But when I look back at it, wow, it was magnificent. It was incredible. And I think of the image of Shiva and Kali. So if you're not familiar, Kali is the goddess of destruction and destroying the ego. And there's this whole story where she goes into bloodlust and she kills all these people and she can't stop herself. And everybody goes to Lord Shiva and is just like, help us from Kali. She's going to destroy everything. And you know what he does? He doesn't blame her. He doesn't shame her. He lays himself down underneath and shows her his belly. He surrenders to her and she puts her foot on him, and then she transforms into, I think, Durga or Parvati. So men, I'm not saying that you should ever tolerate abuse. Women, I'm not saying that you're justified in acting out of anger and abusing your man. What I'm saying is when there is an expression of rage, especially when it's not directed and you're trying to hurt somebody, there can be this really beautiful dynamic of a man being able to hold that. Okay, so some other symptoms. Dissociation from erotic life. There's a lot I could say about that. I just would recommend that you look into the whole idea, the aspects of Tantra, and then your identity being wrapped again in this idea of sacrifice. In the mature psyche, Mary energy can look like sovereign devotion, alignment, boundaries rooted in self-respect, love without dramatic projection, an erotic life that does not erase the spirit. So for me, being married to somebody struggling with addiction, I absolutely took on that Mary archetype. And during that time, before him, I had like my whole spiritual awakening. He kind of, in the beginning, begrudgingly and then enthusiastically followed suit. I really worked into the plant medicine space. I really worked on sort of stripping away and doing whatever it took for me to purify, to cleanse, cleanse the fucking, what a buzzword in the health and wellness space and the spiritual space that are just so clearly pointing to that unconscious Maria or Mary shadow. Yeah, to detox and cleanse and purify. And I did some really hardcore, really cool stuff. And he saw me doing this. It was just like, oh my God, you are just like angel. Because I and the truth was I wasn't only doing it for myself. Yes, there was this aspect of like, I need to heal and fix myself, but it was also this drive of when I learned about the idea that when you work on yourself, you benefit not only 7 generations ahead, your own children and progeny, but you also benefit your ancestors 7 generations behind. So when I learned that, I was just like, oh, I'll do whatever it takes. Like, if this is for my children, if this is for my ancestors in honor of them, for without them I wouldn't be here, then of course I'll fucking do this. And so I got off on him being like, wow, you're doing all this stuff, you're doing whatever it takes. I want to be worthy. I want to be a better man to be worthy of being with you. And what happened there too is because I was just like this elevated being or woman to him, and you know, I'm hyperbolizing in a lot of ways. This wasn't like all of our relationship. I'm sharing details of my life for the purpose of driving this information home. But you know, because I was there for him, he didn't want to let me into the fullness of his being. And so every time we thought that we had gotten to a place where all the truth was laid out on the table about his addiction and everything that was happening, he was still harboring more and more about himself because he was terrified that if I saw who he really was, and I don't know, to get into his head, he probably thought, oh, she'll finally see how truly terrible or unworthy I am and she'll leave me. But when a man lies to his woman about who he really is, then that separation happens there and it's no longer a partnership. It becomes mind games. So some questions that you can ask yourself, some self-inquiry here could be, can you love without possession? Can sexuality and spirituality coexist, or must they split in your life? Are my actions driven by a desire to be a good person? And if I wasn't this good person, would I still be worthy? So true integration to Mary, it's not about repression. It's not about purifying and cleansing and detoxing. It's about the sanctification without dissociation. Do you act from a place of honoring yourself? Okay, let's get into Sophia. So before I do, I want to talk about what Sophia even is, because I feel like this is something that's been lost across time and history. So many of us are familiar with the Catholic Christian version of creation, the book of Genesis. But in the Gnostic version of creation, the book of Genesis, life was an unfolding from a source called the pleroma, and it's this realm of pure light. I love, that's the source, right? Pure creative energy. And from this fullness of existence came the aeons, which are the divine principles as a reflection of this source, the pleroma. One of the aeons was Sophia. Sophia translates to wisdom. It also translates to the hidden intelligence behind matter. So she did something that none of the other aeons ever would have dared to do. She acted alone, driven by love and longing to know the unknown, and she engaged in a creation of her own. So she was propelled by this divine longing to create without perfect balance. And so with that came form, matter, and the birth of limitation or illusion. With that creation came something called the demiurge, which is this false god ego guy who thinks he's the supreme creator and other stuff, but it's super interesting, but we have to stay on topic here. So Sophia is the feminine aspect of divinity that was once honored as the heart of cosmic balance, but she got a bad reputation because of a lot of shit went down within the church, a lot of just ideas and the patriarchy and all that good stuff. And so she got rebranded as temptation, silence, or something simply known as just like balance. And the symbol of Eve and the serpent became symbols of original sin, not awakening. And Sophia is responsible in a lot of ways for that concept of moving from being in perfect divine unity with creation and then descending into the manifest, into the concepts of the mind, to once again return to the source. So some symbols across culture that represent Sophia that's been absolutely borrowed by the church is the dove, the rose, and the chalice. And I grew up in the Catholic Church, and all of those things were actually equated to Maria. And so she's a symbol for the map of how the spirit learns from itself through descent. How light finds itself by entering the darkness it once feared. Then, through awareness, we ascend. So the amnesia and limitation of being kicked out of the Garden of Eden or, just being born aren't shortcomings of creation, but the whole purpose and perfection behind it. So with wisdom comes the understanding that one doesn't have to prove themselves as good or pure. They simply just are. The Sophia just is. So we're a reflection of Sophia's purpose, and she is a reflection of our truest nature. Things like worship of intellect, structure, obedience, believing the divine is above and rather than within, is just steps that are just taking us further and further away from the concept of wisdom. And without wisdom, knowledge is hollow. So as we move through the chakra system, right? The root, the sacrum, solar plexus, the heart, and then I see Maria as the upper chakras, the throat and the third eye. Sophia, you could see it as the crown. It's the connection with all that is. It's the awareness of everything that's been there all along. But this ascent, it's not about escaping matter, but sanctifying it, honoring it. So some signs that you may be in stepping towards the Sophia stage or already in it would be standing in front of the beauty of life, nature, beauty, gifts, capabilities, resources, and not following the impulse to figure out what you can gain from it, what it's worth, and to just be in awe and appreciation. So this wave I mentioned in the very beginning, the rise of the feminine, the rise of the Sophia, the return of the Sophia, it happens through the individual. And you'll know you've followed that wave when you choose love over fear, truth over being easy or pleasant, wisdom over knowledge, and connection over control. Every time you choose balance over division, you're contributing to the weaving pattern of returning to the source. And I want to be very specific with those words, weaving pattern. I've said the words ascent and descent, but really I see it more as like a fabric. We're all threads within a fabric, and at the very center of the fabric is the source. And some of us are on the outer edges of the thread that are very necessary to create the full blanket that is existence and consciousness here. And some of us, our threads have been woven in closer and closer. And as we move through life, and if you resonate with the idea of incarnation, we're moving closer towards the source. So according to Jung, and this is to refer back to the beginning when people think that this Sophia phase is a phase of rebellion, because you're no longer living within the social archetypes of how a man or a woman should or shouldn't be, or how just like a contributing person to society should be. You can come off as cold, detached. You can seem like you've lost your spirituality, but it's just not the case. It's just that you're no longer projecting, and you're no longer, basing your identity off of what other people think of you. I have 5 very specific signs here that one may be within their Sophia phase. And from my understanding, I think it's something that we sort of like jump in and out, and we're swimming deeper and deeper out into the ocean. There's not really a destination. It's more that we're swimming deeper out just to be able to sink under and go deeper into the depths. That to me is life. It's not about the destination. It's about our capacity to dive deeper into the unknown. So, and then eventually, according to Jung, when you are really embodying all of these 5 aspects of the Sophia, then you're in it. Once you're in the Sophia, you don't really leave, they say, but I got to be honest with you. I think it's a choice that we make every single day. It's so easy to choose to live from the mind than from the heart. And you have to be constantly aware. You're on this balancing tightrope, constantly calling for your awareness and your sort of ease into balance, but also battle against all the things outside of you that want to take your attention, your awareness off of this. So the first one is death of hope. It's being able to defeat the enemy of clarity, which is living your life thinking you know everything and you know what's right for people. So it's not pessimism or depression, but it's the cessation of hope for reality to be different from what it already is. It can be viewed as someone giving up or becoming negative, but really what's happening, this experience of a combination of freedom and wisdom accepting limitation. And with that comes grief as well. We could look at how somebody operates within their family system. I know for myself, a lot of my life, I actually think recently I finally have, I understand. Again, it's that enemy of clarity, thinking that I know what's best for them. I've studied all about health and wellness and spirituality. I have all of these tools that have made me so aware of my wholeness and completion, and my life is this fucking dream life. And all I want is to see my family fulfilled and living a beautiful life and no longer suffering. But who am I to decide how they should be living their life? Who am I to declare that I understand all the intricate interweavings of karma, all the sort of God's plan that's playing out for these souls and what they, within the privacy of their own heart, have decided to come to this incarnation for? Who am I to decide that? Nobody. It's not, and as Jung declares in this phase, this understanding, it's permanent. It's like once you know, you can't unknow this. It's just not up to me. Number 2 is radical selectivity in relationships. So we could label this as severe discernment. So it's not isolation from fear or trauma, but it's a conscious choice based on standards not everyone can meet. It's the death of obligation, convention, and hope for change, guilt, duty, or accepting incompatibility. So it's the wisdom of energetic truth. Energy doesn't lie. Have you ever had a friendship that at one phase in your life, it served you? You're like, this person is so beautiful and wonderful. I love this friendship. I hope it never ends. But then one day you wake up and once you see something, you can't unsee it. And you're like, ugh, I don't know about this. But there's still this connection between you two, and the friend reaches out and you feel this obligation to like continue the relationship. But every time it's again like a little, I don't know. And it kind of brings me back to that story about that guy from earlier when I was discussing Helen. It's this understanding that just because somebody is not for you or isn't energetically resonant, they're not bad, they're not wrong. It's just not for you. And your most precious resource is your energy. You are on your own path, your own journey to Ishlan. If you know that reference, you know what I'm talking about. And at the end of the day, people aren't objects that are static and that you can just put in your rucksack and take with you. They're on their own journey as well. So a question I've had to ask myself is this relationship truly nourishing, or is it just familiar? And if it's not resonant, then either that relationship shifts because I can't see any other way, or it ends. And it's not like this big dramatic ending. It's just you love and you let go. And so with that, there is this sort of necessary element of quote unquote loneliness. But it's not from like an inability to connect. I don't feel lonely, and I've been alone a lot during my time here in Costa Rica, or just during this new phase of my life. I used to hate being alone and be so afraid of it. But now it's like it's a choice. I'd rather be alone and whole and authentic in myself rather than be in relationship that fragments me. The third symptom here is no longer having the desire to, or the need to change, heal, or change others. So before this stage, there's just compulsion to share what you've learned with people where they are operating from an unconscious place. And there's that clarity enemy again. And it's this mixture with the desire for power, which I'll get into in more specific ways later. But it's this belief that consciousness can be transferred through explanation and knowledge. But as we've learned here, it's not about that. It's about wisdom. It's about felt experience. So before this phase, it's like this belief that somebody's consciousness can be turned on by you confronting them on everything that they're doing wrong, everything you think that they're doing wrong, and everything that they should be doing right. When in truth, consciousness can only be earned through individual confrontation with their own psyche. So it's not the job of someone outside of them to explain awakening or enforce change. I think of in the healing community is like this idea that somebody's going to fix you or something. Ayahuasca is going to fix you. Yoga is going to fix you. This Reiki practitioner can heal you. But all they can do is bring you awareness. It doesn't matter what happens in these sacred healing ceremonial containers. What matters is how you live your whole life. So again, it's not our job to judge on what they're doing or how they're living, being right or wrong. And I'm repeating this so many times for myself. I have been for 6 months out here in Costa Rica, and I'm about to go back to Florida for a week to see my family. And yeah, I was telling myself this story that like, I'm dreading it. It's going to be heavy energy. People are going to want to take from me. And I was giving my power away to this story. And then I was also telling myself how hard it's going to be after I've lived this connected, wonderful life, pura vida, that I'm going to see all of my loved ones so disconnected and in pain and in suffering. But who the fuck am I to know that that's not how it should be, that that's not absolutely perfect? Steffi. So according to Jung, this can be the hardest phase to integrate because it contradicts what we know about comparison, which is a form of psychological colonization, aka assumption that you know what others need and what's right. So if you truly want to help somebody, if you really, really want to be of service, it's not about the action of helping and changing them. It's about the state of being within your own presence, within your own consciousness that creates an environment for another to come up for air. They can just be. They can just be around you. And so rather than answering like when they're like, help me, it's the answer of saying, I trust you to know what's right for you. It's not about withholding answers. It's about honoring their own process. And I'll tell you, some people will get really frustrated with you. I can see how I used to do psychic readings for years. That's kind of how I made money. And I stepped away from it because I guess it was this step into this wisdom of understanding it's not up to me. A lot of people are coming to me for answers. And at first I would engage in that power dynamic. And then I realized like, who the fuck am I to know what these answers are for these strangers? I can do my best, but it's not about that. And I thought, you know what would be way more interesting in teaching people to be able to listen and connect within themselves. And so plug here, if you are interested in that path and that process and having somebody with you to really encourage you and enable you and to share what I've learned, you can check out the show notes and check out my services. I have this whole mentorship, School of Whispers mentorship, which is really all about that. Really all the work I do in terms of doing the consultations for the Chinese medicine and writing, detailed information on what's happening with your pattern, how you can eat or live. I always bring it back to it's your life, it's your power. I can be there with you, but I can't tell you exactly what to do. You can try, see what works, see what resonates, what doesn't work, experiment. But at the end of the day, I can only take you so far. And so I really focus on providing tools and reminders for people of how powerful they truly are. So this sort of quality within somebody, within Sophia, it's all about loving and trusting someone enough to allow them to struggle and allow them to be. You could call it sacred neutrality. And so we have two more qualities that may indicate that you are within your Sophia stage. 1 is immunity to manipulation, and 5 is the silence of knowing. But I have run out of time here on this podcast. Thank you so much for your time. And I feel like it's almost like I got you all stimulated. I'm like, all right, you're done. So I apologize if you're feeling a bit blue-balled here. But in honor of my time and my energy, rather than getting into these hour and change podcasts that I've been doing now for 5 seasons, I'm working on a new setup here where I've developed a Patreon. On that Patreon, I will be sharing the other side of these podcasts, that sort of change side of the hour here. So if you log on to Patreon, and you can also look into the show notes, and you find my page there, you will find the other side of this podcast where I discuss the last 2 aspects, and then of course kind of tie it all together. On that Patreon, I'm also have a growing collection, a library of guided meditations for you. So you can also check that aspect out if you like the sound of my voice and the way that I work with things. So show notes, you can find all that information here. And before I go, really the most important thing here is that you're honest with yourself, that you're honest and aware with your life. Stay present within your life, and all of it will unfold as it's meant to be. You don't need me. You don't need this whole concept to reach any sort of quote unquote Sophia wisdom phase. All you need is the wisdom that's been there all along in your own heart. If you enjoyed this episode, please share your support by leaving a rating, a review, liking, subscribing, and most importantly, sharing this with somebody who would benefit from this conversation. Thank you so much for being here, for sharing your attention, your awareness, your energy. If you would like to work with me, check out the show notes. And I'm sending you my love as always.